Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, school safety should security and other officials in our public schools be armed? Representative Seth Grove is here. He's going to chat with us about that. But first, we have two reporters that are going to talk about what? Further expansion of gambling in the state? No way, no how. We'll be back in a moment.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, here we just had an expansion of gambling in this state with this whole notion of small games of chance in taverns and restaurants, I guess, and bars. You know, previously they had been restricted to sort of the nonprofits. Veterans organizations were able to do these small games of chance. Now there's a discussion about online gaming. Where is that going to go? We have two of the state's leading reporters in the House to talk about that. Robert Swift with Shamrock-Newspapers and Steve Esack with the Allentown Morning Call. First, I'm going to turn to the court historian here, Robert Swift. Okay, how old is this gaming law, and what changes have we had up to date? You know, the big ones. Run by that one.
10 years ago, 2004, 3 in the morning, 4th of July, slot machines at casinos.
No, the legislature wouldn't do that.
No, they did, and it was like and it was a complicated law, and there have been some changes since then regarding ethics stuff and disclosure stuff involving the industry and the regulation. But now the Senate passed a resolution yesterday for a study looking at major structural changes, adding online gaming, looking at the tax structure, the regulation to keep, Senator Scarnati says they want to keep the state competitive with the neighboring states in the luring gambling. Before
I turn to Steve, one of the things that really surprises me is that we have a gaming board consisting of 7 people. Each of the 4 legislative caucus leaders gets to appoint someone, and then the governor has 3 appointees. Correct me if I'm wrong. But when it comes to issuing the licenses, one of the 4 legislative appointees can veto the other 6. Have you ever seen? We're going to get to something.
Only in Pennsylvania.
Only in Pennsylvania would one trump 6. All right, Steve, let's talk a little bit about this online gaming. What's motivating this? Is it money? Is it declining receipts, revenues for the gambling industry?
It's all money. I mean, Pennsylvania's gaming industry, when they set it up, it has become a national model for success. Pennsylvania, when they set it up, they did it. They didn't take a moral aspect like a lot of states did. That only set up like gambling on casino riverboats down south or something like that. They looked at a financial aspect. What can it bring in for a tax revenue? And when they did that, it was basically geographically driven. They placed stuff strategically across the state based on local demographics. How much was the disposable income for that population? And what do you think that they can bring in? That worked. Other states have followed that model.
Let me pursue this now. There are, in theory, or in law, not in theory, 12 licenses that can be granted.
14.
Oh, I'm sorry, 14. 12 of them have been issued right now. I got that right? And they're scattered geographically, one up in the Poconos near your coverage area, right? Go ahead.
There's one in
Bethlehem.
In Bethlehem,
right.
the Sands, which is by far, arguably, the most successful casino in Pennsylvania. And that is because it is 70 miles from New York City. And when Pennsylvania introduced poker and the gaming and the table games, yes. When they introduced that brought in busloads of people from New York and New Jersey for poker and all that other stuff. So when when New York expands that's going to hurt the Sands eventually in 10 years, something like that, when New York gets its stuff going.
So, Robert, what's driving this then is the concern that revenues will fall off in the future, that we've already hurt the New Jersey industry. Go ahead, finish my thoughts.
We've hurt New Jersey. Langsdy's countering now with online gaming at its casinos. the Pennsylvania casino revenue has been either flat or a little bit of a decline in recent months. Senator Scarnati says if you don't, try to make changes.
The majority leader or the president pro tem of the Senate. Go ahead.
If you don't, try to keep up, it's going to keep on falling further behind, and that's the money for, property tax relief and a host of other things they fund. All
right, we're going to run to a break. I want to continue this and sort of talk about online gaming, where it's going to go, and maybe we'll get to another subject or two back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation, educating citizens and business leaders about important public policy issues and civic affairs. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by BetterSaferRoads.com. To voice your support for safer highways and less traffic congestion, visit BetterSaferRoads.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back. Well, we're talking about an expansion of gambling in the state. We already have a general gaming bill passed about 10 years ago next year. 14 casino licenses, 12 of them have been issued. They're, as Steve Esack just pointed out, virtually all over the state, trying to balance regions, balance populations, balance revenues that would come into the Commonwealth Fund to support a variety of programs. And there's always a debate, Steve, about who gets that money. That's another issue. But when we say online gaming, what does that mean exactly?
Well, no one knows yet.
That's wonderful.
Resolution that the Senate passed doesn't dictate what type of online games Pennsylvania could add. And they don't know if it's going to be slots, poker, and that. And a lot of the senators, Senator Tommy Tomlinson of Bucks County, he's got the Parks Casino in his back door. So he's not sure where that would go, either with Senator Boscola in the Lehigh Valley, whose territory includes the Sands. Both those senators have told me that they really want to make sure Pennsylvania gets this right. They're also very concerned with the societal ramifications. This is going to be one of the biggest lobbying efforts on both sides when it hits. Because, if I may finish,
sure.
The owner of Sands, Sheldon Adelson, is one of the richest men in the world, and he is adamantly opposed to online gambling because it'll eat into his profits, but he also claims there's unknown societal ramifications.
Yeah, I was going to say that if you're a casino operator, you can't be exactly wild about this idea of doing online gaming, can you? I mean, look where that leads to. It may be, there's only so much gaming, or do they think that,
well, that's the thing, is what point is there saturation? What point are they start cannibalizing each form of gambling, cannibalizes each other? And that, when they first passed that 2004 law, people thought it'd be 10 years before they ever saw table games. Yet it happened within 5 years because there was a need for revenue in 2009, 2010.
Yeah. The other issue that strikes me as interesting is that we've had this debate, that over whether the governor can literally by, I'll say executive order, I'll use that loosely, put Keno into the operations, or whether the legislature has to do it. He's had a little back and forth with the Attorney General about that. Is Keno still in the mix? Do either of you know?
Yes,
Go ahead, Steve.
It is. Senator Tomlinson had mentioned that if they expand online gambling, they also think they have to allow the Pennsylvania Lottery to have a shot at that.
That's what I was going to say.
And they don't know what they're going to do, But Tomlinson, out of fairness, Tomlinson said that you have to let the Pennsylvania Lottery weigh in on this.
Yeah, then you run the risk that the lottery declines, and then you've got as Robert points out. All right, before I let you go, this one Trump 6, is not an anomaly. There's at least one other.
Second agency, the Commonwealth Financing Authority, set up about a decade ago, and it has a slight. Every time there's a new revenue pot, they get some say over how some of the money's spent. The transportation law, they're going to get a share of about 40, 60 million. Impact fees from the natural gas drillers, they, dole out some of that. Energy programs, water and sewer lines.
So this is basically a committee controlled by legislative leaders.
Because
I got that right?
They have the 4 of the 7 appointees, and all 4 of the legislative leaders appointees have to agree for something to happen.
So this is where we get into this whole issue of whams, walking around money, where leaders can give individual lawmakers projects.
They say the meetings are public, but they're not well advertised. I've been to a few of them, and I had trouble getting an agenda. So if they really want to make it public, put it on their new website, let people know about these meetings, have an agenda before they meet.
Sounds like earmarks, right? Sounds a lot like congressional earmarks. All right, great update. Gambling, it looks like we're going to have an expansion. All right, Representative Seth Grove is here. We have a bunch of education issues, including should we arm school personnel? That's a hot and big issue before the state legislature. We'll talk about that after the break.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back. Well, we turn our subject from education or from gambling to education. Representative Seth Grove is with me. He's a York County Republican representative. Thanks for coming on the program.
No problem.
All right, you've been involved in some discussions in the State House about arming. Who should be armed in the schools of Pennsylvania for obviously security purposes? By the way, we're having these debates on college campuses right now. My own campus, Franklin and Marshall College, we're having a debate. So there are pros and cons to this, right? Take a look. Pretend you're on both sides of the issue. Give the pros and give the cons. You're good at that.
So looking back, and obviously the Select Committee, we came out with our report on school safety, and it kind of stemmed from the Newtown, Connecticut incident. And we wanted to take our time and make sure we delve into the policy matters and got it right. Like, we didn't jump to conclusions on how to best do it. So when you're talking about firearms in schools, pros to arming everybody. Everybody is armed, so at any point anybody can defend the students, defend the institution against any perpetrator who wants to harm anybody. The hindsight to that is, by arming everybody, are they trained? Are they capable of defending themselves? So we heard expert testimony from state police throughout. I had the ability to talk to some security professionals outside of it too, and they basically said, if you have somebody geared towards security, make sure that the only thing they're doing is security. Like right now, we're doing an interview and we're talking. Right. I'm not really worried about security of my, the surrounding,
And you're not an expert. You may not even be an expert. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You may not know the...
So to have somebody in there full-time who is an expert, who is trained, who has been under those tough circumstances, who understands the ballistics of their firearms, et cetera, it was one of the most critical piece of information that we got from testimony. Make sure you have somebody in there trained. That is, the only thing they're doing is security. The only thing they're doing is security. Because you gotta figure, a teacher who's teaching, who's in tune with the class, isn't probably paying attention really to what's going on the outside because they're focused on that education opportunity.
So your point is, the conclusion that you reached, and you'll correct me or modify it, is it needs to be their sole job. They need to be well trained. They need to understand all the dynamics at work about how to deal with, some crazed person who comes in there with a weapon or whatever the situation might be.
Yep.
That all those are factors.
Yep.
Well, where do you think this goes?
I think we put out a report, and I think it's going to go to the standing committees to look at it. And it's more than just firearms in schools. We discuss bullying. We discuss mental illness and how to deal with students with mental illness.
Yeah.
We discuss SAP teams, which are student assistance program teams. Great programs to really deal with helping the students and try to help them before a worst case scenario happens. We deal with hardening infrastructure to make sure you have security measures in place within the built infrastructure.
So is this going to be an omnibus piece of legislation that you think that has lots of moving parts, or do you think you'll pull this safety issue? It's pretty fascinating because if you look at Congress, where after these horrific shootings, there's still no legislation passed on things like universal background checks, or clips in magazines. None of that nothing has happened. Nothing's happened in Pennsylvania either, right? We have go ahead.
Yeah, we did do strengthening of our Office of School Safety. We provided more grants and stuff like that. Within that, we did do requirements, and this was something led by Senator Scarnati and Representative Mike Regan. Mike Regan's former U.S. Marshal, so talk about somebody who understands security.
So you have an expert right there helping.
Built in-house, and it is great. It is great. Very sharp guy. But they were able to, with this last year's budget, appropriate more money for the Office of School Safety for grants for school districts. Right. And we did requirements already that basically say if you're going to have law enforcement, if you're going to have security, make sure they are trained, make sure they're former, retired, law enforcement to make sure we have the appropriate people in there. Worst case scenario is you don't want a wild, wild west shootout.
We're going to run to a break. I want to come back and ask you about another bill that's bubbling around the legislature dealing with teacher furloughs. But before I do that, I don't want, you don't have to be terribly specific. You think this business with arming folk, do you think that has any chance of passing?
I don't think arming teachers and stuff, I don't think we'll ever see that passed. I think giving flexibility to school districts to hire professionals and make sure we have the right criteria to make sure we have the best.
All right, we're going to run to a break. There's a bill also bubbling around the legislature that deals with the conditions under which teachers can be furloughed. I'm going to talk to Representative Grove about that when we return.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Hi, welcome back. Well, I'm talking with Representative Seth Grove. We're talking about school safety and what could be done to improve that. I want to talk about teacher furlough. But, we were talking at the break, and I think you make a good point. I mean, I've been a classroom teacher for more than 30 years. I don't know that I'd want a gun. I don't know that I'd want a weapon. I don't know. Where is it? What? I mean, that's pretty interesting angle here.
As a firearm owner myself, I have 2 young kids. I know where my firearms are at all times. I have them locked up. I have trigger locks on them. They are secured at all times. Right. If you're carrying a loaded firearm in a school, and this happens to veteran law enforcement, sometimes they get misplaced. If they're out a lot, they might get misplaced. And I think that's a worst case scenario where you have an armed teacher in a school. They walk into the principal's office and say, I kind of lost my gun today.
You can't imagine. You cannot imagine. I mean, and the teacher could be very responsible. I mean, you're moving, grooving, and trying to deal with. Oh gosh! Yeah. All right, teacher furloughs. There's again another bill in the legislature that deals with the way teachers get furloughed. Typically union contracts, school district, teachers unions say seniority usually trumps. What's this all about?
Basically, there's three of us, me, Tim Krieger, and Ryan Allman. We're all co-sponsors of each other's bills.
House members, colleague House members.
So we all three have different economic furlough bills that basically remove seniority out of it. And basically what it is, it's not dictating schools furlough teachers. It's basically saying if school districts want to balance their budget through employee furloughs, it removes the last in, first out seniority clauses out of it. And it bases it on performance because we have now the new teacher evaluation systems.
Right.
So we're going to have data to show making sure we have the best and brightest teachers. If in fact school districts choose to go down this path, we want to make sure we have the best and brightest teachers still in those classrooms, still educating students at high levels.
Yeah. In upcoming shows, we're going to invite folks from the School Boards Association and we'll probably ask some folks from PSEA. We're going to get a variety of viewpoints because there's obviously a contractual issue here, given the fact that they all have contracts and how you deal with those.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, basically how you normally handle the contract stuff is basically language in the bill that says once a contract has expires, that language can't be in the new contracts.
Right.
So if a school district has, for some reason, a 10-year contract that just started, last in, first out would
2, 3, 4 years. Yeah, there wouldn't be 10 years.
Yeah, so it'll kind of be a rotation.
All right, before I let you go, I cannot keep track of all these charter school activities going on.
Yeah.
I've tried desperately. So give us just a quick thumbnail sketch of this.
So
charter schools.
Yeah, House passed House Bill 618, Joe Emmerich's bill, out of the House over the Senate.
And what's that do?
Basically, that provides a lot of great policy, transparency, accountability. We provide a matrix to try to get performance.
Critics of charter schools have pointed that out, right? That some of them are not well run. Some charges against some
and
legal
all the legal charges haven't stemmed from state law. It's been federal law.
Okay.
So there's clearly a complete, utter lack of oversight from the state end on these institutions. So we do that, and then we do some funding reforms. We, number one, start a commission to look at the funding aspects of it. We peel back the double-dip pension aspect and then the food services. Basically, cyber charter schools were getting money for food services, but they weren't providing food to students. I mean, you're doing it within your home confines. So there were some cost reductions. That money flows back to school districts. The Senate's looking at alternative form. It was kind of ironic. All these organizations kind of hated the House version, and when the Senate started moving theirs, the reverse kind of happened. They're like, well, we're kind of glad with the House version now. So we'll see where it ends up at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, this is complicated. I mean, I've tried to follow it. I know that what's going on over in the Senate has got lots of opposition from both groups that would rarely agree with each other. But thanks for coming on. This is a wonderful update. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.